Lesson 10.1 is analyzing surveys and samples. So lots of vocabulary here. A survey is a study of one or more characteristics of a group. So many of you have had to take online surveys before, and they're just asking your opinion about something. The entire group you want to the information about is called a population. And a survey of an entire population is called a census. In the United States, they do a census, like I think every 10 years they come around and they make sure that everybody is accounted for. So a survey is the study of one or more characteristics of a group. The whole group is called the population. And if you do an entire population, it's called a census. When it's difficult to perform a census, you can survey a sample, which is part of a population. And we have different types of sampling methods. So a random sample, or in a random sample, every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. So in a random sample, so I could have my population be my class, let's say third hour, and then I could randomly select people. Everybody would have the same chance. A stratified random sample, first the population is divided into two distinct groups. So I could separate my class into boys and girls, and then I could randomly select some from the boys and some from the girls. So it's stratified. We're dividing it first and then selecting them at random. In a systematic sample, a rule is used to select members of the population. So I'm only going to select members of my population whose last name starts with L. So there's my rule that I set up. A convenient sample, or in a convenient sample, only members of the population who are easily accessible are selected. So we're only going to pick the people that show up to my third hour class. If you're absent, it's not convenient for me to go search, hunt you down. So you're not convenient for me. And the last kind of sampling is a self-selected sample. Members of the population select themselves by volunteering. I will be part of your sample. So we have these 5 different sampling methods. So we're going to classify a sampling method. We have the owners of a company with several factories conduct a survey to determine whether employees are informed about safety regulations. At each factory, 50 employees are chosen at random to complete the survey, identify the population, and classify the sampling method. So the population are the factory employees. They're the ones who are going to be sampled. Now, what kind of sampling method? Well, we've got at each factory. So they're going around factory to factory. So they're dividing them up and then choosing 50 from each. If you look back here, that's a stratified random sample because the population is divided into the different factories, and then the population or the sample is taken randomly from there. So it's a stratified random sample. The next example says, well, what if, in that last example, suppose the owners survey each employee whose last name begins with M. Now classify the sampling method. So we're constructing a rule now. You're only going to be sampled or surveyed if your last name begins with M. So that's a systematic sample. We're using a rule. All right, a sample chosen for a survey should be representative of the population. A biased sample is a sample that's not representative. In a biased sample, parts of the population may be overrepresented or underrepresented. We want to make sure that the whole population, everybody has the same chance of being sampled. Random samples and stratified samples, like the ones that we did in problem 1, are the most likely types of samples to be representative. A systematic sample may be representative if the rule used to choose individuals is not biased. Like, I can't choose everybody who has, beautiful blonde hair because that's going to be biased. So here they want us to identify a potentially biased sample. In example 1, suppose the owners question 50 workers chosen at random from one factory. Is the method likely to result in a biased sample? Yes, because maybe the working conditions at that factory are different. So maybe the working conditions at that factory are different than the other. All right, now we also have biased questions, so we have to be careful with the way that we ask a question if we're going to give a survey. So a question that encourages a particular response is a biased questions. Survey questions should be worded to avoid bias. So you might feel strongly one way, but you can't ask your question so that you get a particular response, because that's not a true sample. So they want us to tell whether the question is potentially biased. Explain your answer. If the question is potentially biased, rewrite it so that it's not. So question A, don't you agree that the voting age should be lowered to 16 because many 16-year-olds are responsible and informed? Well, this one is potentially biased. And it's potentially biased because we're trying to, first of all, we're saying, well, don't you agree? So we're trying to get them to see our opinion. And this is trying to say that 16-year-olds are responsible and informed. So you would have to, explain that. So it's potentially biased. We're saying 16-year-olds are responsible and informed. The way that we could write this is, do you think 16-year-olds should be able to vote? Or do you think the voting age should be lowered to 16? Question mark. And that's it. We're not asking, we're not saying because of a reason, we're just asking, period, do you think that 16-year-olds should be able to vote? Letter B, do you think the city should risk an increase in pollution by allowing expansion of the Northern Industrial Park? Again, this is potentially biased because we're asking about the increased risk of pollution. We could just say, do you think the city should expand Northern Industrial Park? That's without giving them any background information, increasing pollution, etc. Alright, problem 2. In a survey about Americans' interest in soccer, the first 25 people admitted to a high school soccer game were asked, how interested are you in the world's most popular sport, soccer? First of all, is the sampling method likely to result in a biased sample? Well, we're asking people that were going to a high school soccer game if they're interested or how interested they are in the world's most popular sport, soccer. So is the sampling likely to result in a biased sample? Yes. They're asking soccer fans. And part B, is the question potentially biased? Absolutely, because they're saying this is the world's most popular sport, soccer. So we could just ask the question, how interested are you in soccer? All right, that is it. And if you want to get started on your assignment, it's going to be worksheet A and B 10.1.